Hello viewers, welcome to yet another episode of Ascendant Hope. It is our great joy and pleasure to continue to bring you the stories that we bring you for hope, for strength and courage. My name is Ivan Jawene. With me is my co-host.
My name is Christine Kamau, and it's a great pleasure to talk to you today. Welcome. With us today we have a guest, a very special lady by the name of Margaret. But I'll leave that to her to maybe introduce yourself, tell the viewers who you are, and then we shall pick it up from there.
Thank you very much, Christine and Eva. It's nice being here in this setup, and I give God the glory for being here. I'm Margaret Muthoka. I love the Lord. I'm saved by grace, and I live by grace. And the reason why I say that is because of the story I'm about to share. I can say my life has gone through a season at a time. And the reason why I'm saying a season at a time is because 10 years this year, I began a journey I didn't know that I was going to do. The journey began with my brother, my last born brother. He was Paul, passing on. It was very sudden. He was working in Mombasa, and 3 months before his departure, he calls me at 1 a.m. and he's like, I just put the joke there. Alikuwa ananiita, Monzista, Monzista, I want to give my life to Jesus. I was like, what? Paul, are you serious? He said, yeah. So I led him to Christ at 1 a.m. I prayed with him. The next day, I woke up, I asked him, are you sure what you've done? Then because we've all grown up in a Christian family. And he was the one guy who was on the extreme in things of the world. 3 months later, he's in Mombasa, he's fine. Then he starts saying, my chest, my chest, my chest, my chest. Kumbe, he's gotten pneumonia. And so we didn't know how bad it was. He was admitted in the hospital, and they did a test on him. They operated him. And somehow when they finished the surgery, because now they were pulling out the water from the chest, they drained the first one, then the second one, he was like, take him to the ward. So while they were taking him to the ward, one of the wires kind of like got hooked on the bed and he choked to death. And we were like, what just happened? That was the first death in the family. That was in 2013. So when he died, actually I was supposed to travel to go and donate my blood because of the surgery. So the day I'm traveling, I booked my ticket. My auntie calls me and tells me, by the way, you're coming, but you're not coming to donate blood. Your brother's passed on. So that began a journey I didn't know. We all didn't know. I remember my parents being lost, my mom pissed because of the hospital. But that opened up a Pandora box in the family we had never heard of death. So we buried him. He was the fifth born. The day of the funeral, my sister, the fourth born, did not view the body. And she didn't view the body because her husband, who had been lost in Iraq, kind of like she didn't have a closure. So in 2015, now this is 2013, 2015, 31st December, my sister passes on. This very sister.
Wow. That's like 2 years later?
2 years later, she passes on. She had been going through stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of testing. Because how do you go to Iraq to ask for someone who is missing? The government is supposed to help, but they're not helping. So it's silent. So I'd been walking with my sister this journey of trying to find out where is the husband, walking with the family, dealing with, is he alive, is he dead? So we kind of let it go. But for her, she got a lot of stress. She was going through counseling, but a lot of stress. until her intestine broke. So food would go into her stomach, but it would spill in her body. So that's how she passed on 31st. So when everybody was saying Happy New Year, we were like, there's nothing happy about this year. At that time as a family, now we knew what it means to be tested. And I'll say this because as a Christian, it's good always to fall back on God. Ecclesiastes 8:8 says that there is no man who has the power over the spirit, and on the day of your death, you don't have power. So by the time my sister died, I felt like God was resting her from following up, putting her life on hold, trying to move forward, trying to learn her life. She couldn't manage everything. And was I okay with that? No, because she was my favorite sister. So I felt very broken. And I remember my husband telling me, I need to take you home to deal with her departure. So that period ended. And it still lingered in my mind. 2016, 2017, I conceive. I start a series of miscarriages. And I was like, God, what are you trying? It's not funny. This was not a joke, by the way. By this time, I remember when I miscarried my first baby, it was 5 months. I remember going to the hospital and being told your baby is dead. And I went back home. I told my husband, I'm not going to have this baby removed. I need to talk with God. It didn't make sense. By this time, I was between anger, frustration, and needing answers now, not put it on hold. And I started feeling the pressure of death. And by the time I went to remove the baby, it got to a place where that first baby was not coming out. So I called my mom. I told her, come to the hospital to be with me. And she literally had to pray for the baby to come out because I was induced, didn't come out. I was given the tablets, didn't come out. They induced me again, didn't come out. So this time I was having this demand of God. God, you have to tell me what is happening. And when you get there, let me tell you, God pushes you so much until the pressure within you makes you to talk what is inside you. And the other day I was actually looking for that scripture and I realized it's in Deuteronomy 8:2, where God tests us to see what is inside your heart. Yes. And I remember that time I just came back home, I held my belly and I told God, we really need to talk. This is not funny. And I remember my husband telling me, God will bless us with another baby. That was not, it didn't seem well. Yeah. Because naturally when you go to a hospital, you come back with a baby. I'm coming from a hospital, I've gone through the whole birthing thing, and I'm coming back empty-handed. I was like, God, no. This is not the other deaths. This is personal. And I remember that time I got into prayer. I really got into prayer. I really needed. I kept asking my husband, what is happening? What is happening? What is wrong with our family? Why is God allowing this? And the why question, at the end of the day, you realize when you're put under pressure so much, you stop relying on yourself. You have to look beyond yourself to find out, can God answer this? Because humanly speaking, it's not possible. So I engaged with what I call spiritual warfare kind of prayer. I went into prayer fighting and prayer seeking and prayer. So I started leaning more in God. I started waiting on God. I kept asking God.
Let me ask something before we go into the depth of that prayer session, because it looks like a lot of pressure. it's the first death before you fully recovered. Your sister is gone, and then now you're dealing with a loss that is really more personal to yourself. And then yes, you say you leaned on God and you went into prayer, but I'm wondering, what is the period of processing like? Are there times you're beginning to question, is this still coming from God, or you're just able to dive into prayer, and how do you deal with that? How do you process that moment?
For my sister, I think when my brother passed on, I had a strange encounter. When I was traveling to go and go to the hospital to be with my family, I'll sound weird. I had this, I felt lost. First of all, between commercial na mash stage, hapo nilipotea. I literally, physically, I got lost. I didn't know where I was. So by the time I found out where I was, it was time to board the bus. So when I boarded the bus, it was at night. I just took a Maasai blanket and put it over my head. And I cried and I asked God, what is this? And at that time when I was asking God, what is this? I saw my brother dancing. Like, I'm praying, I'm crying. And in my vision, I'm seeing my brother dancing. I said, hey, my sister. I'm like, what is happening? My brother is happy. And then I remembered, oh, my brother actually is in heaven. So he's happy. So somehow, that experience gave me courage. My sister, it was more of, God, you're testing us. God, you're pushing us. God, you're trying to humble us. So we didn't have closure on this matter. So we just left it hanging because there was no answer. My part, when it got to me now miscarriaging, I felt like the Kamba in me rose up. And I said, Timana, literal translation. No. It means this is not for nothing. This has to mean something. This has to mean something. And that something is what I was trying to figure out. Because as a Christian, you can't go to a witch doctor. The Kambas are known to go to witch doctors or wizards or like that. I can't go that route. So I needed God to give me an answer. Because I needed for myself to be okay with what he would tell me. It took my dad to answer that question. He said, Margaret, God does not make a mistake. Maybe, mtoto angekusumbua. I'm saying that because that's what he said in Swahili. Maybe mtoto angekusumbua. So God just rested the baby before you got the baby. So my dad was an authority in my life, and I was very, very close with my dad. So when he said that, it gave me some bit of peace. But then I had 2 other miscarriages, and I just went to the doctor and he told me, just heal first. So that chapter, I closed it with my husband. And I told God, in the years I'm supposed to heal, please help me. Yeah? Have you ever told God something and he has a different plan for your life? I call it the school of God. The school of God, you can't tell God, I've had enough. Because he says, I have a plan for your life. I have a destiny I want you to fulfill. I need you to learn. And I need to prove you worthy of where I'm taking you. I didn't know that. So immediately after those series of miscarriages, that's 2016, 2017, 2019, before COVID, my dad calls us home. We have this very good get-together over Christmas. Then weirdly, he starts saying, you guys, you need to know where each one of you will settle down, just in case I'm not here. We look at him like, this is not normal. He goes to church. That was the week before COVID. He's in church. They finish service, they're in the vestry. He falls down and he dies. He didn't have anything that was wrong with him. There was nothing wrong with him. It was out of the blue. So we are called. We are told, your dad passed on. So the question for me was, where was he? Then I say, when I was told by mom, he was in church. I was like, God, you just couldn't wait for him to come home. You just needed to take him from where he loved. My dad was a guy who loved church, building church, serving church, being in the church. Him and church, one. So he rested. Now, by that time, I was like, God, are you trying to break our family? Are you trying to build our family? What are you doing? Now, by this time, surrender started being my lifestyle, because I was like, you've taken my brother, you've taken my sister, you've taken my children. Now my dad. Now, remember, in all of this, my dad is my spiritual cover. My dad is my pillar. My dad is the one I go to when I need to make a decision. So I was like, not that I had anything against my mom, but me and mom, at that time, we were not gelling. It was easier to talk to my dad and make plans with my dad than talk to my mom. So I'm like, God, what are you saying? And I remember clearly God reminding me, you are my child, you're my servant, look to me. My brother by that time didn't even know what to say. Now he's the only man in our family, and he has to become the man of the family.
So an older brother.
A younger brother, I'm the firstborn. So the immediate one. So him is like trying to figure his way around. So my dad's death was like a good send-off, because then COVID came. COVID comes and we are all praying and believing God and trusting God and praying like everybody was during COVID. And in 2020, my sister-in-law, the wife to my brother, had a tumor. They had done an MRI and the tumor was supposedly small. So they plan for her, come to the hospital, let's do this. She accepts. So when they went to do the operation, the tumor was bigger.
Where was it?
Right here. So because they couldn't open the brain, so they had to go through this side of the brain. So the first time when they removed the tumor, they removed half of the tumor. She was okay. She recovered within 1 week. Remember that this is COVID. So that time, only 2 people could go and visit a patient. So my brother said it's my husband who can go if it's not him. So when my brother is not visiting the wife, my husband is visiting. So now she passes on because of the tumor, because when they did the second surgery, she went into shock. She developed high blood pressure, and just like that, actually, she died when we were looking at her, and we were at the ICU. Now, the strange thing about this death was my dad had died in January 2019. We buried him in February. My sister-in-law dies in February, a year after my dad. So when she passed on, for me, what was difficult was not the death of my sister. I kept thinking about my dad. I was like, Dad, where are you? Where are you? Why aren't you here? How do we handle this? I leaned on my dad. I remember my brother walking away. It took a Catholic nun to hold my brother and sit him down and pray for him. I was there with my sister. She was in a different room crying. I was with my sister-in-law, the sister to my sister. were just hugging each other. She was calling the sister, was calling my dad. My husband was with the body, and it was hard. I think that was the hardest death that we had to deal with, because it was my dad, my sister, my dad, my sister. We couldn't separate the two.
Okay. Let me ask, at this point, as you guys sit and reflect, as Christine is asking, because I remember at some point you said, at some point your dad said probably it could have been the child would have suffered or something like that. But then now there is a sequence of things occurring. Are there any one point, is there any one point where now the interaction turns into, God, where are you leading me? Well,
Yes.
how are you processing me? Or is
And
it now
done corporately?
yes,
That's
is
what I was
it done
asking.
corporately? Do
Is
we sit
it-
together as a family? How does the family deal with the loss? How do they get to go through this?
As a family, every time these funerals would come, we'd sit down, because at the end of the day, everybody's involved. As a family, now my dad had to be the priest of the home to cover and protect us from these deaths that are forthcoming. Remember, each one of us is married. All right? Each one of us is married, apart from the last born son, who died first. So we all come for these funerals, we all come and talk about it, then we each go back home to their families. Now, the more we went back to our families, one of the things I realized for all of us is the way our faith and reliance on God and trust in God became stronger and real. This was no longer religion. This was no longer just dealing with death. This was no longer, let's sit back. Actually, the person who began the altar of prayer was my mom. Now she would call all of us and we would pray. Every month, call all of us, we go back home and we pray for one another. So faith in our family became not this thing that you do when there's a reason to come. It was this thing that you need to do to trust in God and dispel whatever is trying to harm us. But like I said, remember I've said, Eva, there are things that God teaches you that you also have to learn as an individual. So by the time my own miscarriages happened, my husband's faith transformed. I saw my husband praying more. I saw my husband standing in the gap more. I saw my husband taking care of everybody more. I saw my husband concerned about things that previously were in the background. He came out and he became the leader, the spiritual guide, the follower, the concerned person that I'd never seen just because of his loss. That time of COVID, we learned together. We used to do Bible study prayers together every night. I became the pastor I'm supposed to be in my own home, but I still submitted to the leadership of my husband as the priest of the home. So that transformed my husband completely. So the changes I saw in our family is the increase of faith, a depth of faith, and an endurance in the place of fire.
Okay, I think that is very encouraging. I'm just interested because for the sake of the viewer out there, and they're thinking, okay, their faith was developed, but how did they get there? Because someone must be asking, if I was to deal with all these multiple losses, the pain, how do I process the pain? Because ultimately I'm human. I'm looking up to God. I am, but I am human. So how am I processing the pain? And I think that's the same thing Christine was reaching out to, that how does the family process this? How do they journey through this? So that we can tell the viewer, this is the journey, yes.
One of the things I've said is, first of all, family meetings were very helpful. Prayer was helpful. I will not tell you for a fact that by that time we were considering counseling. No. By that time, we're not considering counseling. I think because the person we felt that needed counseling was my sister, my late sister. She had a lot more to deal with. I myself am a counselor. So by the time I started thinking of counseling, was not even that time. I'll tell you that. My dad himself, when my sister passed on, there's a part of my dad that shut down. But his shutdown became a means to prepare us, like, for his death, which was weird. So he didn't deal with it well. He didn't do counseling, but he shifted more to God. So as a family, we didn't do counseling, I'll tell you that. But we were there for each other in case anybody was breaking. Now, where did counseling come from? Where I'm going. Because now, after my sister-in-law passed on, because of the tumor, now it became evident we need to go beyond what is happening. And still, my mom, she called all of us home and she said, first of all, we need counseling for all of you. We've gone through so much. We've dealt with so many things. You guys, all of us just need counseling. So each one of us went through counseling on their own. Dealing with grief is very strange because, let me speak for myself before I speak for the family. For my brother, when he was dealing with grief, he walked away. He isolated himself and nobody could reach him, even the wife. The wife was more concerned about the children and helping them to understand death, such that by the time my father passed on, the kids now understood what is death. And thank God for schools, because these kids were all in school and there's counseling in schools. So the kids got counseling from school. The rest of us, it's to the degree you feel you need help. We didn't quite get it. I didn't get it. My brothers didn't get it. I don't think my sister got it. We just continued. For my mom, there was a support network for women, the women who are bereaved, that really built her up and really strengthened her up. For my mom, that really changed her. The support system of women who have been bereaved, that helped her so much. By the time it came to my sister-in-law, my mom went through the classic 7 stages of death, loss, and grief, from anger to denial to pain to hurt. My brother-in-law is a counselor, and he's the only one who could talk to my mom and help her go through that journey. It was so painful for my mom because my mom had stayed with my sister-in-law during this COVID time. So for her, it was, I am losing so many people close to me. After that, we didn't realize when we were burying my sister that my husband had contracted COVID. That was crazy. Because now, everybody else was tested, everybody was fine, apart from my husband. Hey, 2021 is a year I'd rather delete from my years of life, because now by this time, I was not broken. I was in pain. I was hurting. Every part of me was saying, God, even if it's surrender, even if I was resisting you, this is below the belt. Let me say this. When you put your faith in God, but you look to something or someone, God will bring you to the place where you must acknowledge Him as God and not rely on anything. My husband was my helper, my supporter, my encouragement, my world, my small world. And when that was pulled from me, I'll tell you, 2021 was the hardest year. By that time, I didn't have a job. By that time, my kids were in school. By that time, I myself needed help. Because every time I would go through all the losses, my husband would be there like a solid rock to help me. Now, the book of James talks about maturity. But maturity is born from perseverance, endurance, and suffering. And I was like, God, really? Is this what it means for you to make me, break me, mold me, sift me, to get me to where you're going, where you want me to be? I will tell you for a fact. Everybody prayed for me, apart from me. I didn't pray. I didn't feel I needed God at that time. I needed God, but I couldn't talk to him. He had taken so much from me, I had nothing to talk to him about.
So in this case, you're making reference to your
Husband's death, yeah. So people helped me, people supported me. Remember, it's COVID time, no one is visiting you because the stigma of COVID is there. No one is coming to visit with you because they also think you have COVID. No one wants to associate with you because you are the COVID family. So we were grieving with my children alone. We were going through it alone. It took a friend to tell me, Margaret, you are going on automobile. You need to stop. She literally got me a counselor to counsel me. And she told me, this counselor I'm getting you is not someone you know, but you need counseling. And this counselor who was counseling me, we now had to do it on phone, on Zoom. He was like, first of all, I need you to stop being a counselor. Stop being become my client, not a counselor. And I did 5 sessions with him. By the 4th one, all the pain from the first death up to that time is when he glared at me. And I cried. I cried for 2 days straight.
So that means you've been piling out
all these deaths. And not just that. Now I felt everybody needs to go through counseling. So I got my kids' counselors. I got everybody on counseling. Now, I have to qualify this. When my husband was going through COVID, and he was admitted, because that was the time oxygen and all these things were bad in Kenya, I couldn't even take myself to the hospital. I needed my son to drive me to the hospital. So there was my boy who was taking me every morning, every evening, every morning, every evening. And what was difficult about going to the COVID ward was not just me talking to my husband and seeing him, but my son seeing him. So when he became very serious and the doctors would keep us updated on what is happening, I sought to transfer him. And in the process of transferring him, the night we were supposed to transfer him, the next morning, that's when he passed on. Now, the time I got the call at 3 a.m., I still needed to wake up my son. Twende wapi? And there we were. I watched him die. He's there. Now, he is the one who was hurt the most. He left me in the hospital, got in the car.
That is your son.
Yes. Drove through town at 1:40, 1:50. Then came back to me, and I'm in the hospital shouting and screaming alone because now we couldn't take anybody else. So he's dealing with his own loss, I'm dealing with my own loss. Eva, losing a spouse, losing a father, losing a mother, there's always this one person who will make you understand the sting of death. And for me, it was my husband. Now, when we finished burying him, remember during COVID, you only had 3 days. He's dead. You bury him, you move on. You're still not getting visitors because it's still COVID time. So when I was going through all of this alone now with my kids, and I got them counseling, my son refused counseling completely because he kept feeling guilty. Did we do anything? Did we help? So he would sit on the kitchen counter and it's me to counsel him. Unfortunately, he went into drugs, got into alcohol, didn't help. So this year, I lost him. It sounds crazy for me to say this, but it was his deliverance and my salvation, because he was hurting so much that his pain was both mental, physical, emotional, every way. And he couldn't, he you know, the lecturers, he was in Daystar, the lecturers were so understanding and counseled him and tried helping him. I tried helping him. His friends tried helping him. But there's a place where when you're grieving, you need to let go. You need to let that pain of that loss go for you to start healing. And for him, that letting go, I remember one of the questions he asked me is, Madhe, sasa wakati wa harusi yangu, sasa ni what and walk down? It was hard. And you can only go where you can reach. And for him, we just never got there. So those 10 years have not been funny for me as a family. But there's one thing people need to realize, and I'm saying this for all of us. In the making, when God allows suffering and pain to come, He still has you at the very end. He's still thinking about you at the very end. Because He says, no trial, no temptation that is happening to you that is not common to man. As I was thinking about this, it took me 10 years to go through all these multiple deaths. I imagine those who lose 7 people in an accident. I think of those who lose the entire family and they're left alone. What do you say to that person? So, is God fair? We might not say yes, but He says, I have a reason, I have a purpose. You have to let God make you see what He's saying, but don't focus on the problem. If you focus on what you're going through, that pain, that agony, that struggle, just like my son passed on, you will die and miss what God is doing. You will not just die physically.
Let me interject there, Margaret. I like the scripture that you have quoted, the one that says that there is nothing that you go through that is not common to man. The other part of that scripture says, and God is faithful and He will provide a way of escape for you.
Yes.
The problem is that when we suffer, when you go through a difficult challenge, we stop at the problem. We don't go to the part where God is saying He will make a way of escape for you. And I like the aspect that you're bringing out, that, you know, as human beings, we can only do so much. Ultimately, it has to be God making the way, providing a way of escape. And I think there's something that I think we've said it in this show, where I was talking about that it's good to learn to commonize your problem. don't peculiarize your issues. And peculiarizing issues is where you tend to look at it like, I am the only person who is going through this. And yet the scripture you have said that there are your other brothers around the world who are also going through
The same thing.
the same thing. And so sometimes when we refuse to commonize, to, what is it called, peculiarize our problems, it robs it of the power to paralyze us. You know how you go through something and you say, you know what, there are other people who are going, like you're saying, through our situations. Somebody losing 7 people in an accident and a whole family is gone. That's our situation. And when you look at it that way, then it helps you be able to see your problem as a lesser, not that it's not a problem, but it's like, actually, if it was not for the grace of God, if it was not for the mercy of God, this situation that I'm in would have been worse.
And I think that's the thing. Psalm 91 says that you will observe it with your eyes, but it shall not come near you. One of the things I've realized with people, 3 things, what I've realized with people going through loss. First of all, they don't talk about the deceased, like their life, what happened, what led to their death. Because one of the things you do when you talk about someone passing on, you demystify that power that comes with death. And it removes that, there's this attitude of us, especially as Africans, we glorify the dead more than they are. So can we just first of all bring this person to the place where we talk about them like, angekuwa hapa, ingekuwa. Don't make it so heavy. Don't make it so hard. Don't make it so abnormal that people don't know how to relate with death. Talk about the person. Talk about their life. Talk about what they did. If they were there, don't make it feel like it's heavy. Just lighten the thing. Number 2, everybody deals with the death different. There's no formula on how to deal with death. By the way, if you're expecting me to give viewers, I don't have a formula to deal with death. Because some people hit you. I'll give an example. I had a friend who lost a brother when I lost my sister-in-law. This person cried for my sister-in-law more than the brother. Because they were friends. So this was personal to her, unlike the brother. So there's no formula on how do you grieve. You have to take it as it comes. And I think one of the things, even as family members, people don't seem to realize is, even as family members, kila mtu carries that burden on their own. 3, if you are not a believer in Christ, viewers, it's terrible. That whole essence of just leaning on God. Like, God, I don't understand this, but you tell me you have a plan. I know one day you make this plan known to me. That helps your mind to try and get the answers, because as time comes and goes on, you start understanding what was God saying about this death, about this experience. Because the death is not what you should focus on. It is the lesson God is teaching you that you should focus on. Because for me, in this testing, there was leadership, there was maturity that has come, and I've come to realize I've become an elder. Not because of age, but the things I have gone through now, when I visit people who've gone through what I've gone through, the Bible says you are able to comfort them with the comfort that you received. Yes. So you are able to mature as you go through the experience. So if I focused on the death, I would have missed out what God was doing with me.
And I'm sure there's a better Margaret that exists today
To be
than
honest,
the one that was there before. Your perspectives, your relationship with Christ, your relationship with people, love for the people. I've discovered that sometimes when you go through difficult situations, it produces a care and a concern for other people, as opposed to, because you yourself have walked in the shoes that they are walking in.
Yeah.
So it becomes easier for you to empathize with people and carry them inside of your heart.
Yes,
So I like what you said, the aspect of we must always ask ourselves,
yes,
God, what are you looking for?
Yes.
What do you want?
Yes.
I'm going through this difficulty,
Yes.
and I don't want to concentrate on the situation. I'm looking up to you, and I want you to use this, God,
Yes.
whichever way you want, to mold me, to shape me, to make me a better human. And that's the intention of God.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to touch on something, even as we look at that journey. I think something that popped from the two of you, the fact that, yes, we want to know it is not just happening to us, but not to say that we are downplaying your suffering as a viewer, because death is the loss of someone you love is very personal. And when she says don't focus on the death, it doesn't mean ignore the death exists. I think it's very important to acknowledge I've lost someone and to grieve and to go through the motions of grieving, because at the same time we need to be able to express that, but at the same time not in hopelessness. Yeah? Yes, not as those who do not know the Lord. Not in hopelessness, because ultimately it's not about pushing it aside and saying, okay, God, I'm focusing on what you're doing. It's true. We are focusing on what God is doing. But I think it's also very important to be able to process that pain and deal with it. Because she cites her son. And I think I just want maybe to bring that, because Maggie had a conversation with us earlier, and we've known Maggie for a while. When she keeps making reference to her children, she had older children, because she talked about the loss of children earlier. There were other children, older children, and that is where the son she's talking about is coming from. And we look at the young man really unable to free himself from that pain. And at that point, if we walked to him and told him, don't focus on the death, it would not make any sense to him. And I think in a previous episode, Christine, we looked at that and we looked at the different sufferings and emotions people go through. And we said, it's not about ignoring the existence of the loss, of the pain, but it's being able to look at an authority and a power that is higher than yourself. That I feel the pain, Lord, but I know I don't have the capacity to deal with it by myself. And so I'm releasing myself to you so that you can carry me through this. I don't have the strength, I don't have the capacity to just dispel this and say, okay, it happened, let's move on. It's not practical, and it's not something that many of us would be able to do. But there is grieving, yes, and allow yourself to go through those motions, but also allow yourself to be carried by God through the process. Yeah? I think in a previous episode we said, when you spend so much time gazing at your problem and at your pain, it grows so big that everything else ceases to exist. When you say God will create an escape route, you actually can't see it if you're not seeing Him. And when you're so overwhelmed by the pain, I think that is the thing we want to make sure it doesn't happen. That I'm not so overwhelmed by the pain.
I'm not in denial.
Yes, but
neither am I allowing it to consume me.
Thank you, that's the word.
Yeah.
I'm not consumed by the pain to the extent that I can't see any hope and I can't see God Himself. So that even when He points an opening for me, I can't see it.
Yes.
I can't see it.
You know, one of the things that I learned that people more often than not, they don't know, is to deal with people who've lost dear ones. People stay away because they say, the common answer I had is, I didn't know what to say to you. Especially people who've walked with us through the journey and the many losses. And I'll answer that. It's very simple. Please, just say this. How are you? And then shut up. Just shut up. Because when you ask me, how am I? then I will pause to start telling you what I'm going through.
And that gives another.
And now that is the easiest way when you're visiting someone who's bereaved to give them a chance to do either of the following: to vent, to cry, to relieve what is happening, or literally just to acknowledge this death. Because most people, I kept hearing them saying, I really don't know. And let me say this, at that time, we don't need people to come to tell us what they went through. Because if you have to tell me what you went through, oh, I have several experiences, even me, I can tell you. Simple. Don't keep quiet. Just ask me, how am I? Based on how I respond, you'll be able to know what to say next. Because if you don't ask that basic question, then how will you be able to walk the journey with me? You can't. So please follow up people and just ask, even if it's the kids, just how are you? They'll tell you I'm not fine. So what's up? Don't try and coerce these funny looking words and sentences. I hear people saying, oh, I know what you're going. You don't know what I'm going through. Or I understand. What do you understand? You don't understand. You don't understand. Yeah. Even if you lost your husband, my experience, I'll give an example of a lady who lost her husband actually both of us lost our husbands on the same day when we were friends. So we met and both of us lost our husbands to COVID. So we met and we were like, how are you? The hardest thing is to go into that bed and sleep. Me, that was not my problem. My problem was not sleeping. My problem is I didn't know how to talk to God. But her, she couldn't deal with her bed. I even talked to men who are bereaved. The hardest thing is to go back into that house. So how are you? I'm sleeping in a hotel. Find out how the person is dealing with it. Because at the end of the day, that helps you to know how to come in. But withdrawing and not visiting people. And you know what, viewers, please, I appreciate you visiting us when we are bereaved. The most important time to visit with a bereaved person is after the funeral.
Because that's when everybody disappears.
Everybody just leaves you alone. Everybody now doesn't care. You give us so much food when we don't want to eat it. And we need someone to cook for us. There is no one. Because after the funeral, that's when I'm dealing with, these are my husband's shoes. I need, these are my son's clothes. Who is there now to help me? And I thank God for my friends, including the ones who are seated here. They came and said, let's go out and eat lunch. There are days I would not eat, not because there's no food, but because I'm dealing with so much turmoil inside that meeting with someone and just going outside there and eating lunch, it's not the lunch, it's the fellowship. Helped me to face a day. Let me tell you, when people are grieving, they just want to make it through that day. We don't think of the other days. Just, how do I make it through this day? How do I hold on for the next few hours? So please visit people, call them. And even if there's a whole pause of silence, just say, I'm here. Just take your time and say, I'm here. So be present. Be real in following up on the questions. Just check out on them. Just because if it was not for my son's friend even coming to ask me how I'm doing, this is the irony. I received more comfort from my son's friend than from my age mates.
When your son passed on.
Yes. They were more present, more real, more active, more concerned. Even later on, they still come and ask me, Mama Paul, unaendeleaje? But grown-ups, we buried, we finished. It's like this envelope you need to seal and pretend it didn't happen. It happened. It's still a gap that you need to deal with. Yeah. And for those who are bereaved, I also want to say this. There are people who didn't know that you lost your dear one. When they ask you, just find the courage to go through the story. I remember when I lost my husband, one person stopped me when I was going to church and asked me, how's your husband doing? Very excited. Yay! And so I had to compose myself and just narrate the story. And to be honest, that was the first time I narrated the story in 3 months after he had passed on. And after that, I couldn't go to church. Next vehicle home. I couldn't go to church after that because at the end of the day, this person now is dealing with the loss. I'm dealing with my own grief. And I wish he volunteered to drive me home. But he was caught up. Yes, he was caught up in the moment. He forgot me. And I didn't even know how to. I remember I crossed the road 3 times.
Oh, back and
Back and forth, I was confused. I was like, I wish this person just got me home. Then I would be okay. So as much as you're dealing with your own grief and loss, the other person is also dealing with that grief and loss. And it just doesn't end because you buried the person.
Yeah.
It's more real and more active.
Later. I think I remember one of the guests in the show sharing her loss and saying how tough it is when you're interacting with people who are not aware of your loss. I think she talked about people asking, how is your baby? Is she walking now? Is he walking now? And knowing that she already buried the child. So I think that's really quite a tough interaction to have. But as Maggie is saying, wow, I bless God for your courage. I don't think I would have had the courage to begin to tell the story. Maybe I would simply have said he's no longer with us and walked away. I wouldn't have had the courage to say that. But God has given you that courage, and we are truly grateful. But I think what that calls to question is how do we receive that information as people around, and how do we deal with it ourselves? You know, when I, sorry to bring in this, but let me just bring it in for the purpose of the point. When I lost my brother, somebody said, it's not just the family that has lost someone. There are so many people grieving in this meeting. Their friends, their workmates, their, you know, like you said, somebody cried for your brother more than their own. And they are all dealing with the loss. And I think the appreciation of, because I believe the guy, maybe he meant well, the guy who left you stranded was also left stranded.
Yeah,
because he didn't know.
Because it's like, this was a close friend, like, you see the whole COVID period was a very
separated
crazy
people.
Time, because between the death, the burial, you don't have time to tell anybody. And it was strictly 50 people.
Yes.
So even your family members are not 50.
They are more.
They're more than that. So by the time this person dies, you bury them. And most of the people didn't even know.
Yeah.
So they get to know later on.
Yeah.
So as much as you are, let me put it this way, you can't deal with grief and loss alone.
Yes.
You need each other, because for this person who I was informing that now the friend who is my husband has passed on, first of all, it was a shock. So him is shocked, but me, I was not dealing with the shock. Me, I was dealing with something else. So I couldn't be there present to help him deal with the shock.
Neither can he be
Neither
present.
can he be there present for me to deal with my loss.
And I think that's what I was, yes.
This is now where it becomes very difficult now for both of you when you are together to walk the journey. And let me say this, when you're dealing with grief and loss, we can put a time demarcation of we'll grieve this time, we'll deal with loss at this time. It took a whole year plus for my son to just accept the father is dead and couldn't let go. And that's what killed him. Literally, because he died, he was on the road, he got a hit and run, and he died on the road. He couldn't deal with them. My dad is not here. My dad is not here. He couldn't deal with that. When my sister-in-law passed on, she was a principal. We had over 300, 400 principals from 4 counties coming for her funeral. So I'd never seen so many principals like those, because she was a leader. And most of them who came to comfort us, they would say, you might not know it, but your sister has done all what she was expected to do, and she did well. This is the evaluation of God being spoken of by men. And for us, it was comforting. It is very weird to hear someone telling you, good and faithful servant, you've done all that was expected of you. She died at 30-something.
Wow, that's young.
So in man's economy, how do you explain age equals you've lived your full total life? But yet those comments, those remarks became a source of comfort to us. And then we were able to say, it's not about age. It's about fulfilling your assignment on earth.
Wow. You know, Maggie, as I listen to that, I'm listening to this conversation where we are at now, and how it built up to this. And I'm looking at a growth trajectory that then I'm asking, at what point was there a turnaround? Because now I'm listening to a Maggie who can be able to say, this is God.
And speak life to other people.
God was doing something.
Yeah.
God has done something. Yet, I remember we had a conversation in a previous episode when we were saying we sometimes get tempted to look for answers elsewhere. And I remember at one point you said the family began to think, is it something happening in this family? Are there things around this family? Where does the turnaround happen so that you say, okay, we thought there were all these things, but now we understand it was God leading us somewhere?
We are the temple of Christ. And more often than not, we rely on people, jobs, family, friends, money. I can go on with the list to give us that wholeness of life and living. What God does when He starts removing the things you hold on to, what holds you together? For me, the brokenness came when my sister passed on. My own blood sister, the second death now in the family. Because the ideal society, you get married, you have a baby, you have a family, you settle down. She was at the ideal. That's when she passed on. People wanted us to look into their family, as we were looking at the circumstances of their marriage, because everybody looks at something. The society was looking at, kwa hii mji wamekufa wengi. Now, for us, when we came together as a family and sat down, I told you the first person to sit us together was my mom. She told us, when she stood at the grave of my sister, she realized, I will go to her. She will not come back to me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Why am I saying that? Because when my sister died, I've told you it was 31st, she refused to be in the hospital on Christmas. She said, Christmas is about family. So you guys were coming home, you're eating the goats, we are sitting together as a family, I'm part of the family. And we did. We all went home at Christmas. And she looked and she told my mom, naenda, tuende na wewe. So, both my sister and my brother, before they died, they knew they were dying. More often than not in culture, elderly people are the ones who know they're dying. But these two, my sister and my brother, they knew they were dying. My brother told me 3 months before he died, the day he called me at night, I've seen 2 men coming for me, and these ones are not leaving me behind. So I've prayed for you and my brother and my dad because you two are very close to me. My sister, before she died, she told my mom, I know I'm going, but I want to go with you. Can you go with me? Let me put it this way. When you have people who trust in the Lord, God said, I will always reveal things to you because you're not servants. You're my friends.
I no longer call you servants.
You're my friends.
Yeah.
And as a family, we felt that revelation of younger, my brother died at 35, my sister died at 40 something. That revelation of them knowing their deaths before they come and somehow preparing us, but us we were not getting because we were like, they're talking funny. Remember, we are not dealt with death. That was the turning point for all of us because, like I said, even before my dad died, he prepared us. We started looking to God more. That even when it happens, like my dad, the way he was talking, he still talked like a person who is dying. So when it happened, we were like, wait, Dad literally put his house in order because everyone got to know this is your place. Everyone was told this is your mom's property, including the extended family. He had put everybody in order. It is not this thing, more often than, like I said, it's not this thing that comes to you as an enemy. Because Christ dealt with death at the cross. He conquered death when he resurrected and he said, death, where is your sting? That statement is not of man, it's of Christ. For us, when we looked back as a family and reviewed our family, forget about my husband, forget about my sister-in-law, all the other deaths, God prepared us.
Yeah.
But we didn't know. And that is why my mom, when she lost her mom, the husband, my dad, and got in the support system and started being helped, she started being the support system that needed to help the rest of the family to function. That was the turning point for our family.
And then now the focus.
And now the
became
focus
on-
stopped
Shifted.
being anything else that people are trying to say. And let me say this. When God is about to elevate you, he brings you down. There is no way God will bring a covenant relationship into a family because covenant deals with power. God will not elevate you in a place of power if you can't handle the things that need to be dealt with, where you are humbled and you realize people die, how do you deal with it? People make losses, how do you deal with it? People suffer as families and start from scratch even when they were up here. There is no way God will give you power unless you are humbled. And then he can trust you. We are the place of covenant. But we started by being broken to be brought up. But we knew it by the third time. So at the moment when all these other things were happening, we were able to say as a family, this is our walk with God. This is who we are. And let me say this. If there's someone who's already in 2024, in 2023, it's me.
All right.
Because I have the victory of God.
Okay, we are very thankful.
As we come to a close,
Yes.
I'm thinking about, there's something that Margaret has talked about, knowing how to handle people that are going through difficult challenges and stuff like that. And I'm thinking of this scripture that says that